Good afternoon, everybody. This is Matt Sloan here from Skyfire Consulting. I want to welcome you to our webinar today, a comprehensive guide to launching a DFR program. We are so excited to be here with you guys, and we have an excellent panel of guests joining us today. So let me bring them in here real quickly. We've got all of our friends joining us here. I clicked the wrong button there. All right, there we go. Got all of our friends joining us here today. We've got Mike Rogers, our VP of Public Safety for Skyfire Consulting. We've got Deputy Chief Brandon Gurley from Brookhaven Police Department and Lieutenant Abram Ayana, also from Brookhaven Police Department, and Officer Matt Rowland from the Fort Wayne, Indiana Police Department. So thank you guys all so much for joining us. We are thrilled to have you with us. So let's, what I figured we'd do right now is just kind of go around the room and introduce ourselves. So for those of you who don't already know Skyfire and myself, we are a public safety focused drone consulting company. We've worked with about 500 agencies across the country on starting public safety drone programs. And of course, today we are here discussing drone first responder. There are about 10 of those programs that are active right now in the country, and we have worked on 8 of them. So we're very proud to be a part of this sort of new concept, seeing a lot of success in all of those programs. And we have 2 folks from those programs here today who are going to tell us more about them. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Mike Rogers, if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure. Thanks, Matt, and appreciate the panelists that have joined us. I'm Mike Rogers, Vice President of Public Safety Operations at Skyfire, and my role is generally to take training, public safety training and DFR programs, expand them, and try to expand the training offerings that we have for public safety agencies, as well as working with the FAA, consulting on the best hardware and best software for these agencies to do what they need to do.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. I will turn it over to you, Deputy Chief Gurley.
Yes, thank you. Brandon Gurley, Brookhaven Police Department, Deputy Chief of Police. Been here since the city's startup of the police department in 2013. I decided that helping start a police department wasn't challenging enough. So we've been involved in starting up a lot of other projects and programs, and we're excited and thankful to be included today to talk about our experience in starting up the Drone First Responder program, lessons learned, and how we are seeing benefits from the DFR program. So thank you for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for being here. And I will turn it over to Lieutenant Ayana.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Matt and the Skyfire team, for having me. I'm Lieutenant Abram Ayana, Lieutenant of Criminal Investigations with the Brookhaven Police Department here in Georgia, not to be confused with all the other Brookhavens out there. There are 2 other ones that I know of, Mississippi and New York. Additionally, in addition to my CID duties, I do have the privilege of being the UAS Program Manager for the Police Department, and myself, in addition to my Sergeant, Matt Murray, I had the privilege to really design and build what we're seeing now in our pretty notable DFR program, being one of the original agencies here in the Southeast to operate a program. So thank you all for having us. Hopefully we can share some insights and things that we've learned.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure to have you, sir. And over to you, Officer Matt Rowland.
Matt Rowland, Fort Wayne, Indiana. Thank you, Matt and crew, for the invite. I'm a 17-year veteran of the Fort Wayne Police Department. I've been around and helped start our program in 2017. We've been actually working on our drone first responder program probably since it's been over a year now since we first visited Chula Vista. And so it's been quite the adventure in learning about the program and the ways in which we can make it work. And so I'm happy to be a part of it today.
Awesome. Well, we are thrilled to have you, and we thank you for being here with us. I want to say hello to all of our viewers out there. A bunch of people signed up for the webinar, particularly a bunch on LinkedIn, a bunch on Facebook, and we're also going on YouTube. So hello to all of you out there. I saw a comment from our good friend David Lane over in the UK. So this is an international webinar. So good to see you, sir, and thanks for joining us. So let's go ahead and get started and jump right into the topics at hand today. So we're going to kind of go through DFR programs from top to bottom here. This is not a let's briefly explain DFR and talk about how great it is, but we actually want to get into the nitty gritty of what it takes to start a DFR program. So you are in the presence of 2 departments who have started DFR programs. We worked very closely with Brookhaven on starting their program. Matt and the Fort Wayne team did a lot of that on their own, which is awesome. And we certainly commend you for wading through that, and to both of you for understanding that this is this is not to be taken lightly. This is a time-consuming process, but a very rewarding one at that. So now that we've kind of met everybody, I think what I'd like to do is just kind of talk about what the DFR concept is exactly, and just kind of walk through that as it relates to the traditional response method, which is what I call the one officer, one drone method. So for that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Mike, to take us through what the concept itself is.
Sure. Thanks, Matt. Yeah, drone as a first responder or DFR, really, I think in a nutshell, is taking a drone from a stationary point, a fixed point, and moving it to a location to get situational awareness kind of as fast as we can. So in the case of most of these departments that are here today, they have a fixed drone on top of a rooftop, and we get a 911 call, and we want to move that drone to that 911 location as fast as we can get it there. I think ideally about 2 minutes is a good window to try to get into, or try to get under, and start getting situational awareness. This is a different program than patrol. What I traditionally consider patrol would be we're moving out to a scene and we're putting a drone up over a SWAT operation, or we're putting it up over an accident reconstruction. But in this case, the thing is sitting 24/7 or whatever shift is available and positioned, ready to go. And the situation where you get out of that can be pretty significant. This could work for police departments. It could work for fire departments. It could work for EMS as far as delivery. And so there's different levels of this. You don't have to have a significant budget to start this program. You got the first layer, which is basically a drone launching off a roof. You have 1 or 2 drones, and you're pushing this drone out into a short distance location. You can have a slightly more advanced program where you're pushing the drone out, and you have additional software which can help you for situational awareness, pushing the video, remotely controlling some of the video. And then you can have a higher level program where in some cases people are actually contracting out the flying part. So someone sitting on the roof flying, doing the maintenance and those kinds of things is contracted out. But a public safety professional is always, the one who's talking and operating or moving the data and controlling what's coming out of the data. So talking to their own people. So there's kind of different layers of it. It doesn't need to be, like I said, a significant investment up front, but certainly as the program grows, we think down the road, we see this going to a place where potentially you could have 911 drones supporting police agencies, fire agencies within a jurisdiction, even potentially doing medical delivery.
Yeah, no, and it's such an important thing to, point out that really DFR as a concept, has traditionally been used as a public safety tool, or specifically as a law enforcement tool. But there is definitely room for this to be used as a fire rescue tool as well. And even, like you said, medical device delivery and things like that, because honestly, once you have a drone on the roof and a capable operator and software to drive it, it's really, whatever you want to do with that program. DFR is kind of the concept of operations, but it can be applied in many different ways. So I appreciate that, Mike. And just looking to you guys next, I'll leave it to you guys to decide who wants to talk about your individual programs first. So Matt or Lieutenant Ayana, which one of you guys wants to jump in here?
I'll let Matt go first.
Very kind. All right, Matt, go for it.
So we started with a trip to Chula Vista back in June of last year, myself and Sergeant Brad Mueller, who's in charge of our unit. We went out there to see how they did business. We brought that information back, brought it to our chief. Our chief was already basically sold on the program, so there wasn't much there that we had to sell him, except on how we were going to do it, what we needed to buy, how much manpower was going to take, and that kind of thing. So as far as getting the program up and running, we're going with a light model with one location to start with, and that's been an interesting battle of trying to figure out where you're going to launch from, where's the best location, and those kind of things, and equipment to buy and software to use. And then of course we've gotten the FAA waiver. Officer Mike Hickman from our department has gone above and beyond in that area and getting that waiver for us and done all the legwork. So I really appreciate his efforts in that. And he's also helping push the program forward. He's helping the team get it done so that we can get there. So we're trying those basic, the basics, I guess you would say, kind of a mid-level program, not kind of a full with 4 locations, but certainly 1 location with the waivers to do it.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, and obviously that's where every program begins, and then the hope is obviously broadening out from there. So Lieutenant Ayana, you guys have been active for quite some time now within line of sight. You recently just got your beyond line of sight as well. So talk us through that. What does your program look like?
Yeah, so we started researching drones back in mid 2020, right at the onset of the pandemic. Looking at drones, I was a morning watch patrol commander, and we'll get eaten up with car burglars, as you all call them in some other parts of the country. We call them inner autos here in Georgia. And it was getting frustrated because our officers would get to the area and it would be dark at night and we couldn't find folks. And so you can imagine playing hide and seek and we're in patrol cars and the perpetrators could see us coming. So it really grew out of frustration for not really being able to catch bad guys, and never had any idea of what the DFR concept was, never heard anything about it. Until I went to the chief and started talking about, hey, can we get some drones? And the chief's response was, we tried that years ago when we started, and we were told we couldn't do it because we have an airport in our adjoining city, and literally the approaches and the takeoffs and landings are right at our city limit. And so I was like, I feel like we can do it. I started doing some research, and during that time, one of our majors was able to, he saw a YouTube video, the first YouTube video that Chula Vista ever put out, showed me the video, say, I saw something cool on YouTube, showed me, and my thought process was, that's cool, but that probably costs millions of dollars, and they'll never give us the money to do it. And we reached out to Chula Vista, had a phone call with them in mid 2020, started really kicking the wheels on it, made contact with the folks over at Flying Lion, who have a big role in Chula Vista's program. They gave us some more information, and from that point, it was about waiting for the right moment. And one day the chief came to me talking about a gyrocopter, and I was like, well, if he's talking about gyrocopters, I can probably land a DFR program. I thought it was like a happy medium. And so I landed that DFR program and showed it to him, and that was the first part. And then I had Barry Brennan from Flying Lion come in and do a demonstration or presentation on what DFR was and how Flying Lion was helping Chula Vista be successful in their program. And the chief saw it, the deputy chief saw it, and started asking how much it would cost. And Barry turned to me and said, oh, yeah, I gave the lieutenant, price breakdown. And the chief turned to me and said, so you've been holding on to this. And I was like, yeah, I just had to wait for the right time. And so the timing hit right. The chief said, so how can we do this but build it ourselves? And that's when the work really started. And so we started doing the research on what it would take to build a successful program. The chief sent me out to Chula Vista for a week. So I spent an entire week with that team at Chula Vista PD learning how they set up and operate a professional drone program. Fritz Reber reached out to him from a Police One article and did that. And after I spoke with him, he connected me with all the folks that he had been dealing with to get their program successful. And from that point, we got our council approval, working with our city attorney, making contact with the ACLU, our district attorney's office, got a lot of community feedback on our policies, our procedures, and really built the framework for what you see today in what is a truly transparent, forward-leaning DFR program. And the feather in my cap, what really made me feel the best was in April 2021 when we flew that first mission, and the deputy chief was there, and he turned to me and said, does it feel real now? And I said, yeah, now I moved from the nerves of, can we actually execute this, to, hey, can we keep it in the sky?
Yeah.
So then my fear turned from, all right, we got the stuff implemented and purchased. Now, can we keep the drone from falling out in the sky? And we've progressed from that now to keeping the drone in the sky to now going from line of sight to beyond line of sight. And then the biggest crowning moment was when Fritz Reber, Don Redmond, and his team came to AUVSI in Atlanta last year, and they came out and saw our operation, and they were like, man, you did it, and you did it in record time. And so from that point, we really leaned in, and with the support of our elected leadership and our city manager, are really taking this thing to the next level, and we're going to build it out full scale here in the coming months.
No, that's awesome. Well, congratulations to both of you. I know it's been a long and hard-fought battle. You guys both mentioned Chula Vista. For the sake of those who aren't aware, I would call them sort of the grandfathers of the DFR program. and I mean this in the nicest way possible to Fritz Reber, because I'm not calling him a grandpa, but Fritz and like you said, and Don and Vern Salee over there, and of course Chief Kennedy over there have really done an incredible job of getting that program going and keeping it going. We're going to talk about a little bit about their program here in just a few minutes as well. But you mentioned getting the approval from the higher ups. We're lucky enough to have Deputy Chief Gurley here from Brookhaven. So sir, if you would kind of walk us through that process from your perspective, because you're taking what you and the chief bringing it to the council and to the city managers, and I think that's a really important piece of this to talk about.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Well, first of all, the number one thing on any agency's list that is looking to a DFR program, I would say, would be find you a Lieutenant Abram Ayana. It has to be different when you're not taking hours. Had it not been for his foresight, his leadership throughout this, our program would not be where it's at now. He's absolutely phenomenal. He grasped not only the concept operationally, but he grasped the overall view of the city needs and how this fits into accomplishing the goals for the city. And he grasped it in a way that you don't see many supervisors or mid-level managers grasping it. So kudos to him for continuing to push this program forward the way that he has. For us, for the higher ups, those of you that are on here, the importance of having that broadened understanding of your city's vision, your community needs, what tools and resources you have to meet the community needs, and then leveraging those opportunities or the opportunities that you have to bring about new ideas. For us, it's in our vision. It's in the city's vision statement, and it's included in almost every mission statement of every city department. The importance and the focus that our city puts on being nationally recognized. You see them use nationally recognized throughout our vision statements here at the city of Brookhaven. So being able to capitalize on those desires of city council to look to ways to be nationally recognized was something that we were able to use in introducing this DFR program. It's something that at the time one agency was doing on a broad scale. We learned of a second one that was beginning a DFR program, but no one here in the Southeast was doing something on this level with drones. So this was an opportunity for us to be nationally recognized. We were, as Lieutenant Ayana alluded to, we were in the middle of the pandemic. We were looking for ways to be effective, to continue being effective in our policing while reducing citizen contacts, for example, as the pandemic grew. So we leveraged on that opportunity of ways to increase policing, but reducing human contact, police contact with citizens unnecessarily. So looking and understanding, it was mentioned earlier, situational awareness. As police leaders, we're always looking at ways to provide the tools and resources that our officers need to be successful. We give them all kinds of tools in the way of lethal and non-lethal tools to approach and deal with the various encounters that they're going to have day to day. But this program has been a tool that we've been able to use that gives our officers knowledge to improve situational awareness. When we can get on scene in a minute, maybe a little over a minute on average, and get eyes over the scene, and a trained police officer feeding information that's controlling the drone, feeding information to the ground units about what's actually taking place, not what the hysterical 911 caller said is taking place, but what's actually taking place, and providing that officer the knowledge to improve that situational awareness. Our officers are going in better mentally prepared to address whatever's going on. And this has been one tool, unlike any other, that's been able to improve the knowledge and the situational awareness going in. So I know those are a few broad areas, but those are some of the key things that we looked at, just understanding, again, the council's view, the city's view, and how to go about and leverage the opportunity when introducing this in a way that makes sense to them, and in a way that can improve our overall operation as we provide public safety to the community.
Yeah, no, that's super helpful, and to look at that from the top-down perspective, because as I said, these guys are the boots on the ground. You're the one that's going to have to take the phone call from the from the community and from the mayor and the city manager and all that. So I appreciate that perspective. So one of the things I want to do before we get any further is we didn't practice this feature, so we're going to try this. But let's see here.
Hey, Matt, you mind if I second some things there real quick?
No, please, by all means.
Okay. Well, I think, it's certainly in the case of Lieutenant Ayana, but it's my experience that most of these programs are not started top down. They aren't programs that are dictated from management in order to begin. They're programs where somebody with some energy, certainly some resilience and some sense of humor, tries to move this program for the right reasons as an operational necessity, and moves this program up, presents it. Oftentimes there's so many landmines potentially when you look at this program and you don't really understand it, that I think management, city council allows folks, there's a lot of concern and apprehension on these types of programs. But typically what's happening, if you're listening, what's happening is you're trying to send this up to management. They're saying no. And in the case of Lieutenant Ayana, and I know several cases in the past in my own experience, that be persistent with that. If it's the right tool and you think it's the right fit for your agency, and in a lot of cases it is, continue to make it work. Make it work with what you have. Don't wait for some magic budget fairy to drop a bunch of money in your lap. Make it work with what you have, and you can make it start pretty quickly. And then once you prove its worth, or at least the potential worth, is when I think, and you assuage some of the fears amongst the city and amongst the leadership, looking at risk versus reward. I think that's when you start to establish some momentum, and I think that's when management will start to support that program. And as the lieutenant was saying as well, you spend a lot of time, maybe a couple of years sometimes, trying to get these programs up and running. And once you start getting them up and running, and they take on a life of their own within the department, within all the attention that comes with that, the media attention, the other agencies, and all the things that come with it. And then you need to kind of transition from, hey, we're building a program and making this work, to we're going to sustain this program. And I think that sustainment is something that we need to probably discuss more and work on now that these programs are starting to evolve.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Mike. And I mean, I think so. What I was trying to do here, and let me try this again, is actually show these statistics from Chula Vista, because when you talk about showing the worth of a program, this is a pretty amazing way to do it. I mean, and this is why both of you guys, I'm assuming, reached out to Chula Vista. So this is their current statistics as of yesterday, that in the almost 3 years they've been doing it, 11,564 calls responded to, 1,345 times their DFR program assisted with an arrest. This one is key for me. 2,904 times a DFR deployment avoided dispatching a patrol unit at all. And so that's pretty impressive, because those are potential interactions, as you said, Chief Gurley, about, reducing contact and reducing danger for the officers and for the citizens. They were first on scene almost half of the time in those 11,000 calls, and the average response time was 180 seconds. That's 3 minutes, which is unbelievable. And of course, we can post the link here to this in the chat as well, so you guys can look at these stats directly, and they're updated daily. Talking about that, how do you guys, how do you guys look at these statistics, and how are you, applying this in your jurisdictions? Ayana, how are things going, as it relates to these statistics in Brookhaven?
I definitely wanted to chime in on that, and thank you for calling on me, because I was looking for the raise hand button, and I realized so it wasn't going to happen. So we see pretty consistent results of what Chula Vista's seeing. Our drone does respond first on scene 51% of the time. And we're there within 180 seconds, like they say, the vast majority of the time. And so prior to us getting our beyond visual line of sight, what we saw is when we were operating within line of sight, we were getting sub 60-second response times consistently. And then we had to kind of recalibrate and adjust ourselves in the past month, since we've gotten that waiver, to realize, hey, we can't be everywhere in 60 seconds. And so that beyond visual line of sight waiver changed our response times. And so for this current month we're in, we're about 158 seconds. And that fluctuates day to day depending on where we're flying. And of course, as you know, if you got a headwind versus a tailwind, it's probably going to take you a few seconds longer. And so that is something that we see consistent 50% plus with their first. One of the things that we do slightly different from Chula Vista, and we followed the model to the T from the beginning, we stopped counting arrests. And the reason we did that is because very early on, we were like, hey, why are our arrest numbers a lot higher? But what we realized is, as a drone operator, we have no bearing on whether or not that ground unit makes an arrest, whether they physically arrest someone. And so oftentimes the drone will get there first, identify the subject of the 911 call. The officer will make contact, and the one that sits right in the back of my head is a while back we got a call of a guy who was allegedly stealing items from light poles. So they thought he was stealing wire or something. The drone responded to this large shopping center, pinpointed the guy walking through the plaza, was able to follow him, give the patrol unit his location. The patrol unit stopped to make contact, recovered the property, found out, hey, this is a guy who was under the influence, probably with some amphetamines or methamphetamines, and released him, didn't make an arrest. And so for us, we were like, hey, that was an arrest, but an arrest didn't happen. And so we calibrated and said, hey, how many folks were identified or detained with the assistance of a drone? And so once we started doing that, we started to see a lot more traction in the numbers that we were gathering. But you can see from our data and Chula Vista's data that the response times are pretty consistent. If you're operating within those same restrictions, line of sight or beyond line of sight with that same range, we're still getting there within being first on scene over 50% of the time or right at 50% of the time. So the data is pretty consistent from the East Coast to the West Coast, and we don't have Santa Ana winds.
Yeah, no, that definitely is going to affect things. Well, and I think that gets to the importance of actually keeping track of the data. So, Matt, do you want to tell us a little bit about your program? How, are you guys tracking this data? You guys aren't regularly doing it yet, I think you said, but what are you doing as far as keeping track of that data as well?
So we're still in the infancy of the program, so we don't really have a lot of data. But I will tell you that one of the things that our chief was really, what he's really looking forward to is that stat on how many times you don't have to send a patrol car. That's one of the things for him is that if we can send the drone and be able to deal with it and save resources for other higher priority things or other uses where the officers need to get out there, that's been one of the big goals for our chief.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely critical. And the way I look at it, from my perspective, not as a law enforcement officer, but I was an EMT at one point, is every time I had to drive through lights and sirens at a red light, and every time, I'm put in a dangerous situation, that's, putting me at risk. It's putting the public at risk, as I'm screaming through the streets. And so if we can let the robots do the work there and save us a little bit of that trouble, I think that's pretty great. So we're starting to get into the nitty gritty of program operation, which is great because that's really what I wanted to do today. So if you would, guys, just kind of talk me through, what types of calls you guys are seeing regularly. And, did you pre-identify certain types of calls that you absolutely would send a drone on, or how do you make that decision about when to send a drone and when not to send a drone?
So I'll jump in here. So early on, it changes, it progresses. With everything, when you become more comfortable with a tool and understand the value of the tool, you're more likely to use it. And so very early on, we were very limited in our mind frame and our scope of how we wanted to use this tool, to the point where we're like, oh, if it was a domestic at a house and they went inside the house, we wouldn't fly a drone to the house. But very early on, maybe within 2 weeks, we realized, hey, so what if that domestic gets violent and that person who got violent gets in the car and leaves, and we need to know that, and our officers need to know that. If they come out the house with a gun while they're responding, or what if it's an ambush? What if it's a fake 911 call? And so we really expanded our thinking on what we respond to. And so now we've changed our thinking from, so how can a drone be beneficial, to why would a drone not be beneficial? So it could be a private property accident. And I think one of the first calls we went to was a private property accident in a plaza. And we flew the drone to that 911 call and picked up the phone and called the caller and said, hey, I just want you to understand that we're here. She's like, oh, where are you? If you look up, you see a drone, and your car is this car, the other car is involved. We have the tags. We have a picture of the vehicle. So if the person tries to leave, don't try to confront them. Don't try to block them in. Because we've seen across the country in law enforcement, those run-of-the-mill calls turn deadly because somebody tried to leave or somebody tried to intervene. Any call can escalate. And what the drone allows us to do is reach out to folks and say, hey, there's no need for this to escalate because we're here. We've seen everything we need to see. We've got tags. And that lady was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And she's waving at the drone. And so from that moment, we started saying, how can we change our thinking? And so every day is a challenge. I'll see a call drop in the CAD in my office, and I'll walk over to my pilot and say, hey, why don't we fly into that call? And they're like, you know what, you're right. What if they get in the car and leave? What if it's an ambush? What if it's somebody walking around with an assault rifle waiting for our cops to get there? And so officers are doing that. And so I wholeheartedly mean it when I say, in order for our drone not to fly, there's got to be a real reason why. So whether or legit, we just can't get to you because it's outside of our range. And so there's not a call we won't respond to in short.
Is that how you guys are approaching it, Matt, as well as you guys build out your?
Well, I was going to say that's a great point, is that you never know, right? Like it could turn into something more or less. You start thinking about traffic crashes on our department. If it's just a private property in the roadway, no injuries, we only send one police officer. But if it's at one of the busiest intersections in the city and the drone gets there and, shows that traffic is a lot more of a mess, you can immediately start to send a second officer to help with that. It's the things you don't think about, like the lieutenant mentioned, whether it's inside or you think it's going to stay inside or it's going to go outside. It's our pilot's discretion as far as flying to it. If they want to fly to it, then they're going to be able to.
Yeah, no, that's really important. And the other thing that this sort of brings up too, and I want to make sure that we talk about this, Mike, I'm coming to you on this one, is privacy too. I mean, I know that you guys have both dealt with this, and Chief Gurley, I want to hear from you on this as well. You're going to fly it to every call, but you're only going to fly it in response to 911 calls, which is something you guys have both been very clear about. This is not, you're not proactive policing. Was a term that we discussed the other day. So, I mean, Mike, you came from the FBI. Everybody thinks the FBI is spying on them for everything. So you probably have a different perspective on this, but walk us through that.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to step back on this last point real quick too, it's dangerous to really try to justify these programs through statistics, because when you're fighting for budget money within an organization, you try to statistically justify what you need, how much you need, and why it's successful. But to me, the most important result of these drones, their utilization, is when they keep someone safe. So an officer's driving to something that they think is a mild situation, and they're met with somebody who's holding a weapon. It's nice to see that with the drone first. Or when you're doing a SWAT operation, it's nice to put the drone in and clear those danger spots left and right first. So those are potentially saving someone's life, and they're not statistically identifiable. So it's really about using these things for safety first kind of thing, more so than it is justifying that how many different arrests or things we've had. So that point made. So for privacy, yeah, there was a lot of discussion about this. We didn't really have a DFR program in the FBI. Our programs were case specific, so we had to have a predicated investigation going before we could employ these kinds of tools to that. So they were, whatever I could put in the air at 500 feet, or with a manned aircraft or a crewed aircraft at 5,000 feet. Those were places that other aircraft, other drones could navigate or could be found legally within the rules of the FAA. So it's an open sky sort of policy. So the drones were basically launching to a point and operating over a point of a target or location that was already a predicated investigation for us. So in this case, it's a slightly different situation because there's not a predicated surveillance or investigation going on at this residence or this business yet. We're going there to find out, but we're pushing directly to the site where there's a 911 call. And I think in these cases, knowing that the drone is not loitering in backyards and flying around people's houses, unless they've called 911 and they are asking for help, in which case I think they would be accepting of that. And there's a lot of other rules that go with that as far as what you can and can't keep. The crewed aircraft couldn't really get person identify PII information like a drone can. A drone can start collecting some of that information if it's low enough. So there are rules about scrubbing that information, going through it, keeping versus destroying that information or that video. So they're starting to, I think, catch up on the legislation of that. I can just say, just from a general experience level, the drone is not seeing as much as some people would imagine. And if the biggest concern in your life is that a drone is going to look in your bedroom window, close the shades, and you've defeated the drone. So I think it's really about putting the tool where we need it, getting the information that's needed to keep everybody safe, and then pushing it back to its launch point. And there's absolutely no privacy issues with that, as far as I see.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely correct. And yeah, it's a low tech solution, but one that works, that gets some blinds. So not to make light of it, of course, but Chief Gurley, what feedback have you guys gotten from the public? Has there been any outcry? What are you hearing there from your level?
Sure. We were very careful during the startup of our program to address this issue. We all know that we as police we have as much authority as our society allows us to have. We've seen through time policies and policing change through societal input. Pursuits are all across the board with how pursuit policies have changed due to public outcry for other policing techniques and resolutions. So we went into this very carefully, wanting to make sure that we understood what our community expectations were here and how our policies would help complement that. We engaged our district attorney's office to ensure that there would be no challenges with how we operate that would limit or impact in a negative way their successful attempts at prosecuting our cases. And we consulted, we had our city attorney very heavily involved as we developed our policy, and we engaged with the ACLU and had several meetings with them as we went through drafting and developing our policy. And at the end, I can say that that everyone was on board with a policy that works to help improve public safety while not infringing on the privacy of others. We do not do any proactive patrols with our drone at all. Everything is responsive to a call or to an investigation. So that's one area where we wanted to make sure that anyone else coming on board, any other police departments coming on board, start up this program would not hit challenges because of a negative impact that we had on a DFR program. And that's what works for us in our area. Other areas may find themselves more restrictive or more with more room to do more with their drones. But this is what works through us. We know this through community engagements, public hearings that we had, and through working groups with stakeholders that help guide our policy development and how we operate our program.
Man,
that's great.
Yeah, please. What the Deputy was saying. So most folks don't know this, but I think like 75% of our city council are attorneys. And so that helps when you've got attorneys that you've got to go before and ask and answer their questions. Our city attorney, I can't downplay his role. He had foresight in areas that we weren't paying attention to initially. And it was his idea 100% to have a conversation with the ACLU. And the way that worked, just to give folks background, is I wrote a policy, sent it to the city attorney to look at. He sent it back and said, I like this. Let's consider these two or three changes. We made it. Then we engaged with the ACLU, sent them our policy, got together on a call, a meeting, and fleshed everything out. Then they sent us a response document, say, hey, we like this, but we want you to consider these 5 or 6 things. And they were thinking about things that we didn't think about. For anybody who's thinking about considering starting a DFR program, the ACLU's main concern from our interaction is what are we doing with this data? With the government, it's a massive amount of data. People's identifying information, or the PI, like Mike Rogers said, is what we're gathering because the drones are that good. So what do we do with that information? And from our conversation with the ACLU, we said, hey, if it's not pertinent to a criminal investigation, after 30 days, we're getting rid of that video. We're not retaining videos of folks just walking into the program because just don't happenstance somebody called a suspicious person call in. No, if we check it out, there was no criminal activity observed after 30 days, that video was gone. And that protects folks identifying information, and the ACLU love that. It works twofold because then when somebody comes and says, hey, give me all your drone video footage for the last year, if it's not pertinent to a criminal investigation, we just don't have it because we don't retain folks' information like that. The ACLU was like, hey, that's great. For us, we don't have to pay for the data storage, for all this miscellaneous video of trees from our drone flying over. Another concern was, hey, while you're flying to a call, are you looking in folks' backyard? The whole concept about drone first responder is to get eyes on a situation as quickly as possible. I can't do that if I'm looking in backyards. And so very, very intent and deliberate on making sure as soon as our drone launches, hey, where are we going? Let me zoom in to where I'm going and start flying that way. So I'm not looking over here, not looking over there. The only time you'll see us looking down or around is we're probably lost.
Yeah.
Like Chula Vista, we don't have, the coast over here, the mountain over there, and this palm tree over here. We got a bunch of pine trees and oak trees and cherry blossom trees. And so all of it looks the same until you get your bearings.
So you're looking for oak trees, not weed grows in
Right.
people's backyard, is what you're
Right.
saying.
Right. We're just not doing it.
Right.
Or we're looking for church steeples, because I can tell you that that's Brookhaven United Methodist Church or this church. Outside of that, it just doesn't happen. And so I think as long as we continue to be intent on telling folks that, and we strive to do that every single day that we operate, and we're bringing on some new tools online. I tell folks another thing when you're starting this program is you have no idea how much data you're going to have on your hands. There's so much data. That was the one thing that nobody ever really told me. They told me how to start an aircraft operation, how to make sure it's legit, how to make sure it's legal, how to make sure it's safe. But nobody ever said, hey, you're going to get this massive amount of data. And so I would tell any agency who is considering doing this is be ready for the data and what you're going to do with it. The data is important because that's how we justify what we're doing, right? So what's the purpose of having a drone first responder program if I can't tell the chief this how long it took for us to get to a call last month?
Yeah.
So
well, and that
is important.
That's a good segue into our next topic, because believe it or not, we've actually been talking for 40 minutes already, which is crazy because I feel like we're just kicking back, having some conversation about DFR among friends. No, it's a great question, and I think that leads us into the topic of software, which is how we fly these drones. It's how we collect this data, and it's how we figure out what to do with it and how to make sense of it. I will say, Skyfire we don't care what software you use. We're very agnostic in that sense. You guys are using you guys are using Cape from Motorola. Matt, you guys are using DroneSense. I see our friend Larry Bogus is commenting on our thing here. He's using Paladin software. I personally don't care which software you're using, but let's talk about the software in general. Is how do you use that to your advantage? How did you make the decision? Which way to go, and how do you advise others on that? And I'll start with you, Matt, on that.
So we have a very resilient program prior to DFR. We have 10 pilots. We're flying almost every day for mapping, for crashes, for different things that regular patrol is doing. And we have been using DroneSense for about 2.5 years. So they actually came to us in the midst of some different talkings and us telling them we were going to Chula Vista, and we actually started testing their software early on. And that's kind of how we went with their software, because it's very, very familiar to our pilots already. So they know how to use it. It has the same kind of style, and everything looks familiar. So everybody's really comfortable with it. So it was a pretty easy decision for us to be able to go into the DroneSense and use it on they're calling it DroneSense Remote is what they call it, not DFR. But that's how we decided on them.
Awesome. And you guys, Lieutenant Diana, you guys are working with Cape and Motorola. What's that been like? And what do how do you decide? How did you decide which software to go with?
So the reason we chose Cape is because Cape was OG. They were the only ones out with this capability at the time we launched our program. And so we didn't really have an option, number one. But number two, that's what Chula Vista was using. And for me, nobody's ever said it to me. So maybe just be internal pressure. So I always felt like my career was riding on the success of this program. And so what you're not going to get me to do is go try something new if somebody who's been successful and pioneered at it is using it. And so that was the first thing I said was, no, we're not going to go try this out. We're not going to go try it, because we've been approached by other vendors. But I wanted to go with the guys are the godfathers of the godfathers of this actual phenomenon of DFR used. And that's why Cape was the logical choice for us. It was the only choice. And since then, we have worked very closely with that team to continue to develop that software and the capabilities. And I make no bones about it. I'm not selling a product. I'm not in a relationship with anybody. And to that point, I've met with Ryan Bracken and the amazing team over at DroneSense. And when DroneSense launched DroneSense Remote, I was excited to the point that they came here to Brookhaven. We spent hours together talking about their software and features and things they can do to enhance their product, because I realize as an end user public safety agency, it's best for us to have the best products for all of public safety. And it's nothing like having options. And so DroneSense is going to make CAPE stronger. We love CAPE. We meet with them bi-weekly to talk about, hey, where they are, where we want to see them go. And that team is working hard for our program to make it the best program possible. I think CAPE, because we're CAPE users, I think it's the best, right? Because we're the best.
Well, and that's, I mean, you guys both hit on it too. I mean, that's exactly why we stay agnostic here, is because, we don't want to be, selling a product just because somebody paid us to sell it. We want to be making sure that the right department has the right product at the right time. And, certain departments already have existing relationships, Matt, as you did with DroneSense, or, as you might with Motorola, for your CAD software, or Axon for your body cams, or whatever the case may be. And so, we want to make sure that all of our clients have the ability to get the right stuff. And, I'm not going to be paid to say otherwise. Unless it's like a ton of money, then I'm going to move to the Bahamas and I'll get it tattooed on my forehead. I'm kidding. Yeah, thank you. Well, I'm in a rental house, as I told you. So, but thank you for calling me out on it. I appreciate it. So a couple of other things I want to hit on, as far as the nitty gritty of starting a program. How did you guys choose your launch locations, and what challenges does that bring? Because most of them don't end up being necessarily on the public safety building.
For us, we were looking for locations that had enough height and were in those areas where we felt like we were going to be flying. We have relationships with a couple of hospitals, and actually an apartment complex that we've tested from and that we'll be using. The biggest thing was also doing some testing to make sure that the internet was good up there, and to make sure that everything would work and be able to launch from those locations. Because if you have a great location but the internet's terrible, then that's not going to help you either.
As Abe just pointed out.
Yeah, I wasn't going to say anything.
No.
So that's the big things for us. And then we've looked at those two locations are downtown. We've looked at two locations that are in some other areas that we want to check. One is a mall, and the other one's another hospital. What we talked about this when we were preparing for this is that we also, another thing that came up was we had to get an agreement with those private buildings to be able to fly. And as far as the city being liable. And so our city attorney, like the lieutenant was saying earlier, he's had his city attorney involved in different things. We've had our city attorney involved as well to make sure that we're doing everything the way we should be as far as liabilities and who's responsible and that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, and it's such an important thing, because it's not just about where you go, but how you make sure that you're not damaging property and internet and all that. So what are you guys doing in Brookhaven?
So we looked at a couple different ways. The first thing for me was, hey, how do I justify putting a drone here? And so the deputy chief had the foresight to get with me and say, hey, let's get some heat maps to see where our citizen-initiated cost of service originate, as well as our officer-initiated cost of service. And so if you look at those two things, our launch locations drop right in the center of our hot zones of where our calls are coming in, number one. The second thing I had to think of was, hey, who does the chief have relationships with that he can pick up the phone and call this property owner? And because they know him, I can piggyback on his great relationship. And that's where chiefs are important, because that's what they do. They go out and they make relationships with the top folks in our community. And so we've been able to land literally on the top of some buildings because of the chief and the relationships that he has with condo associations, hospitals, businesses, you name it, in the city. Not just the chief, but the city manager, our city council. So all of the folks who support us and allow us to use their rooftops are folks who are supportive of law enforcement and supportive of what we want to do. It's also important that we make sure that we're doing this with a method. There's a method to the madness, not just picking up a map and saying, I want to put a drone there, I want to put a drone there, I want to put a drone there. There's got to be some strategy with it. And that's how we stay safe from folks saying, hey, this is just the police putting a drone in a predominantly Hispanic area or predominantly this area. That is what we want to do, is we want to be able to say, hey, there's a statistical reason why this is where our calls for service originate from. And then from a budgetary reason, we can say, hey, we're not just putting money into something that'll never fly. We've got the data to support it. And then on top of that, we needed a building that was high enough, because unlike Chula Vista and some other areas of the country, we have some obstacles. And when I say obstacles, I mean trees. Georgia is not a flat state at all, so you got plains, rolling plains and hills. And so we needed a building that was higher than everything else. So I joke that people say, oh, Governor Palin said I can see Alaska from my house. And I tell the FAA I can see Stone Mountain from my rooftop, to give them a visual of how far we can actually see.
So, hey, Matt, real quick on that. So, First Lieutenant, I understand that your first attempt was to fly off the balcony of your house, right? Didn't work out.
It was just, I got some magnolia trees and some pine trees, and then there's an RF issue, and then I didn't have a beyond line of sight waiver, so I just wasn't going to make it happen.
Right. Well, no, seriously, the other thing you guys did too that I'll point out, and it's important, is, and you spoke a little bit about it, but you got a really, really busy corporate airport in your jurisdiction. There's a lot of traffic, corporate jets, private aircraft, and helicopters coming out of the airport. So early on in the process, you got with the airport authorities, you got with the FAA, and said, listen, we understand this is here, and we definitely don't want to interfere with these operations or make this unsafe. So you brought that into the conversation, and they worked out basically a very good, negotiation based on the Lance altitudes to be able to fly in close to that airport and still do your operations. So I think that's, it's important to know, don't be intimidated if you have airports in your jurisdiction. That can be worked out. Maybe you're not flying within a mile center point of the airport, but for the most part, you can work something out to work around those airports.
Well, you read my mind, Mike, because I was coming to you next to talk about FAA stuff. So
okay.
The process here, it, like any other public safety program, start with a regular COA and then move on from there. Talk us through what that's been like, working on it from our side, from the regulatory consulting piece, and then also you guys can talk about what it's been like on the receiving end.
Sure. Yeah, from our side, the first step is a COA, like you said, a jurisdictional COA. Those have come a long way. When I first got my blanket COA, it was 2 years. And so we're at a point now where most of these COAs are being realized within 4 weeks. So we're getting the jurisdictional COA for the agency, and then we're looking at a beyond visual line of sight, if that's the route they want to go. And in most cases with DFR, that's the route you want to go. That process is taking, again, 4 to 6 weeks, somewhere in that ballpark, depending. And depending on how the agency is setting up people on the roof, how many people, how many visual observers, et cetera. But there's slightly different, there's variations in how each of these agencies are doing that and what's being allowed based on their circumstance. But so we worked through the second part of that, which is the BVLOS COA. You don't have to have the BVLOS COA to start the DFR program. You can start it under your general jurisdictional COA, but it's helpful. And then we're looking at we're assessing, as the lieutenant pointed out, we're kind of assessing what do you have in the city that's unique. If you have airport, terrain, towers, those kinds of things, based on where you want to put the program, where you want to base it, then we're working the COAs and the language around that. So figuring out the best situation for everybody involved, including the airports and the FAA, and seeing where it's reasonable to fly drones and logical to fly drones. Those are the first couple steps, and then from there, it's about setting up the SOPs. It's about setting up currency. It's about setting up the program and the flight portions, and then the third big step in that, like Lieutenant pointed out as well, is we're trying to consult on what's the best software out there and the best for you. What's the best hardware out there? What do you have? What do you need? And are you going to be getting different software? And then how do we start collecting all this data and managing those kinds of data points? But I mean, to round it out, the FAA is, we say a lot about, how long it takes and frustration with the overall regulatory situation. But, they certainly didn't want tens of thousands of little airplanes thrown in their airspace by people who are not registered pilots. So they're working through that problem. They're trying to separate it. I think one of the big, concerns coming up is going to be the drone delivery situation, how we're going to integrate first responder drones with drone delivery going on at the same time. But in the end, I think most agencies are getting their COA reasonably quick now. Rarely is there any significant pushback to that, and that's the first step.
Yeah, and you guys, Abe, you've been very clear about this, and Matt, I think you guys have been doing the same thing. Is don't wait for BVLOS to start, and why has that been so important for you guys?
Yeah, so for us on the DFR side, and we talked to a lot of agencies, waiting for our BB loss to start this thing up. For me, and I can't take credit for this. This was a Skyfire tip when we first contracted with you all to help us launch our program. Was, hey, let's get our feet up under us, operate visual line of sight, learn everything we can about DFR and being safe about flying drones, so that way when the code brown moment happens, you know how to work through problems. And I can tell folks now, look at my team now versus where they were a year ago. And if we would have a problem that we needed to troubleshoot, you'd have a code brown moment. But now problems like, oh, stand by 1 second, work through the problem. We've become accustomed to it, and we could do it because we could see the drone right there versus the drone was 2 miles out or 3 miles out, however far it's out beyond line of sight. Oh, we've got a problem. Oh my gosh, I got to figure out the problem. So that's why it was important for us. We got our feet up on us. We know what we need to know to be successful, and now we're just building upon that. And so I would encourage anybody, don't wait for the FAA. And there's some great guys at the FAA who want to see this thing succeed. Their concern is making sure it happens safely. And their concern is my concern, because the last thing I want to do is any life to be lost or any property to be damaged because somebody went after something ham-handedly. And so they've been supportive of us from the jump. They just want to make sure it's done safely. And I think by moving forward, like you all advised us, line of sight and then graduating, it made more sense for us.
Yeah, well, and that's, I mean, I think we can't let this thing end without talking about the FAA and how great they've been to work with, because, I think there are some policies that are taking a while to change. Most of them are congressionally mandated or statutory. And so I understand that they take time to change. We're all working to, get this done more quickly than we can. But I think I speak for all of us when I say that by and large, the FAA has been very supportive and very positive. Specifically, all the individuals we all work with every day at the FAA, and making sure that that this is able to happen and that we can do it safely. We have. I want to let you weigh in on that as well, too, Matt. But we've got a couple questions coming in. So the first question is, how do you justify the dedicated manpower? From a fire perspective, most agencies can't afford to take a person off the line to run a drone at an incident. Let me start by answering that question. That's from Michael McCabe. I'll put that up on the screen here. I would say that the whole purpose of DFR is that you don't have to have dedicated manpower from the scene that you're pulling away to operate the drone on the scene if you've got somebody already dedicated to it on the roof. And that's kind of the beauty of this, is because I know most agencies we talk to barely have enough people to fight the fire or serve the warrant or do whatever it is they need to do, let alone pull them aside to fly the drone. So how would you guys respond to that?
I want to hear the deputy chief's response, because he's the man with the plan on the manpower. It's ultimately his responsibility to make sure it all flows. Chief, you got something on that one?
How did I not see that coming? No, so that's a great question. What we did here is, once we kind of developed and decided how we were going to step into this innovative, use of technology, we did not budget for new positions in the agency to run this drone program. We looked at how are we going to do it with our existing numbers without pulling resources off of the road, because we still need boots on the ground to respond to calls. So we put it out. Lieutenant Ayana put it out to the agencies, looking for those that would be interested in going through the training and certification for their Part 107 license to fly drones, and explaining what was coming our way with this DFR program. And we had a much larger response than what we expected to get. I think our biggest number, and Abe, you can chime in a second with where we're currently at, but I think we had upwards of about 15 officers that completed the training and successfully received their Part 107 license, and would rotate an overtime assignment or for a few hours a day on their off day to come in and fly a drone for this DFR program. The success that we've seen and how we've walked through and stepped into this, we're at a point now to where we are in the budget process for next year. And instead of us going to council asking for positions in order to make this a more robust program with dedicated personnel to fly the drone, we've had our council and city management coming to us saying, tell me in next year's budget what you need to add people to this program, because we want to see it running longer than it is now through the overtime details. We want to see more success We want to see more of the success stories that you're putting out when you can be in the air longer, more days of the week. So the way that we stepped into it allowed us to not only get buy-in from our electeds, buy-in from our community, but we received buy-in from our officers who were able to sign up, go through the training, get the license, and fly the drone during the first 12 plus months of our program, to the point now where we're preparing a budget and we expect to be able to add positions to our department next year that will be dedicated to growing this program even larger.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. That's really great stuff. Matt, how about you guys? What are you doing manpower wise?
So sometimes you got to get creative. This summer we've had an officer that's in our unit that's a school resource officer that's been assigned to our team. So we've been able to use, since school's out, we've been able to use him all summer, and so that's helped tremendously. We're still looking at other avenues as far as other officers, and because we're not adding anybody as far as to what we are, but not specifically for this. So it's kind of creative, and sometimes trying to figure out the manpower, and I'm sure some overtime is going to probably eventually be involved, but that's above my patrolman's position. I just wanted to go back real quick and mention that you're talking about the FAA. Don't forget about those airports and developing relationships with your local airports. We have a Class C, and we also have a regional airport, and we have a very good relationship with both of those. One of the first things we did when we started our team back in 2017 was we made a trip up to the tower and met with those folks, and we took a look at their tower. We talked to them, told them what we were going to be doing. And now those phone calls, when they need to be made, as far as if we're going to be near them or flying them or anything, there are easy phone calls to make because they know what we're doing and that we're being professional with it. And as far as the DFR perspective, just make those relationships with your local, because that also helped us too when we went and did our safety presentation with the FAA itself, because some of the local airport officials were involved in that interview as well.
Yeah, that's super critical, especially as Mike mentioned earlier, when you've got big airports and heavy jet traffic in and out. The more agencies we talk to, the more airspace problems we're running into. So major airports and military bases and all that kind of fun stuff.
Yeah, Matt, if I can interject one other comment for that same question. So I see the comment came from somebody in the fire service, and one of the things I would think about is just Monday morning we had a large apartment fire here in Brookhaven, displaced 40 residents. And I'll post a video on our social media here later this afternoon. But the drone first responder was not yet in service because that fire went out like 6:30 in the morning. We're able to get a drone to that fire, put a drone over that fire, and see what the sources of the fire were. And the fire service was able to direct their attack on that fire. I think about how much it takes to get a police officer to respond to the scene in a car versus how much it takes to move fire apparatus, especially when you look at the price of diesel fuel. And so when we look at all those things and look at the savings, I think there's an opportunity for the folks who have to make decisions to say, hey, what is the benefit to us and what can we gain from having this? And so you think about I think about all the fire calls that I've run as a police officer in my career that weren't actual fires, there were smoke complaints. And I've gotten there and I've been there walking around, and then a whole battalion pull up, 2 engines, a ladder truck, a couple of EMS units, and then a battalion chief. And I was like, man, that was tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars just to come and see that it was just smoke on the stove. So that's apparatus, and that's the resource that the fire service, in my professional opinion, from my experience, could save. And I would love to see how this would be implemented in the fire service. I know Chula Vista PD works closely with their fire department to deploy their drones to fire calls, and I think you'll actually see some savings to the taxpayer. And we're also seeing where folks who otherwise wouldn't be attracted to these public safety careers are now attracted to this profession because of the use of this technology. We've gone to job fairs and folks are saying, man, I hope you all were going to be here because you've got drones. And so we're seeing a benefit from that as well.
That's a good recruitment effort as well.
Matt, addressing that question too, real quick on the fire side. His question is more about taking it off the line and again, differentiating between a DFR program and kind of what I call patrol, but what it would be more of a localized mission where you have someone out there and you're launching the drone off the fire truck to go see use the thermal or something. The DFR doesn't. The people out on the scene that are going to be potentially launching or involved in that would be someone out of your team that you would not be putting on the hose line or something. But if you're talking about a DFR program, it doesn't need to be someone from your team in that regard. It can be anybody that you train to launch that drone to do the launch part. And so I think the programs, I always used to say the advice always was, well, how do you start? What do you have enough to start a program? And the answer always was just get in the program, get in the drone business, and then the program will grow on its own if it's successful. So basically, right now we're talking about someone on the roof out of service. Potentially, it doesn't have to be an officer or firefighter, but it's giving you the intel before your people get there. And then the program may turn into eventually you push the button and the box opens and the drone deploys on its own. You won't need the person on the roof as the FA environment and sensitive void gets better. But get the program started now so you can at least get those baseline markers, the SOPs, the COAs and those things in place as the program proceeds. And it's up to you if you, like in the case of Brookhaven, you want to cover Monday through Friday, you want to cover one shift, 24/7, whatever. You can base the manpower on really how successful the program is at that point.
Yeah, no, that's great stuff, Mike. Thank you for adding that. We have another question coming in from BCSO, UAS, SUAS. What radius are you looking to cover with a single drone?
Is that in general for the COAs we're seeing, or I mean, I'll just say this and then maybe let the guys talk. But the first thing is Chula Vista got a 3-mile radius off a fixed point. That was the first one, and that was, according to many people in the FAA, that was maybe not going to be repeated in the near future. Then we saw it come back to 2 miles, and 2-mile radius off a fixed point was the standard. The new standard that we're seeing on the latest BV loss waivers, there's 2 miles off the aircraft. So it doesn't designate a fixed point anymore. And that's starting to change, I think, to the positive. So as long as you're clearing 2-mile radius around the aircraft, wherever its location is, that seems to be the way things are kind of moving. And, it could change tomorrow. But right now, if you're getting a 2-mile radius off a fixed point or off of a mobile, let's say you're a county level organization and you have a dive team or you have a SWAT team, and they want to basically base it and launch off of Bearcat, they need to be clearing a 2-mile radius off that launch point. So for the case of the DFR, the fixed point DFR, right now we're seeing 2 miles.
And if I can jump in on that one to that point, 2 miles, 3 miles max is a good number for range, because what you start seeing is how does my battery usage really factor into this? And so our mission and our program guidelines say that our drones will land with a 20% reserve for emergency. And so if you're running a drone out 3, 4, 5 miles, you got to remember you got to fly there, you got to see what you can see, and then you got to fly back. And that considerably impacts how far you can fly. And so my recommendation is always around the 2-mile mark. That gives you a nice amount of time, depending on weather conditions, to have your drone on station and then return with that reserve. You should never plan to land your drone with 0, 5, 10, 15% battery, because you never know. Your drone coming back could potentially have headwind that slows it down and consumes more battery. And so those are all things to consider. With the CAPE software that we use, our drone automatically knows how far it flew. The algorithm is able to say, hey, these are the weather conditions, and this is when I need to come back. So whether we want to bring it back or not, it's going to come back because it knows what it needs to do to land with 20% battery to make sure that we have safe flights.
But let's not forget that if we're out at 2 miles or whatever we decide our max range is, these cameras zoom in really well. So for the guy that asked that question, the guy that asked that question, don't forget that you can still zoom in quite a distance, even if you're only going to go 2 miles out. You can still see another however many miles as far as visibility. So that's one thing to remember. If you think that 2 miles isn't very far, you fly a drone out 2 miles, that's a long ways, and then you can see even that much farther as that camera zooms out.
Yeah, that's a great point. You can get to the edge of that 2-mile radius and then still go another 2, 3, 4 miles with some of those cameras. The next question we have, let me scroll down here, is from Sean Armstrong. Do you have only stationary landing zones, or are you able to have the drone in a car and fly up when applicable? Of course, when a landing zone is safe enough to fly. And of course, what you mentioned about the COAs changing now to a 2-mile moving bubble around the drone actually changes that answer potentially in the future. But I know you guys are operating from fixed sites. Has anybody considered operating from a mobile launch location?
So we have 4 different locations that we're going to basically make different depending on the day, that we might move to different ones. We're not going to, we have drones in cars now, but that's our guys working the street, or, the tactical response. So if we get an extended incident, we're probably going to have the guys that are on the team with drones in the cars come out and cover that. And then DFR is going to go back to its launch location. If I'm understanding the question correctly, but we're not going to do a mobile DFR necessarily. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I would just add, from our perspective, something, we think might be useful in the future is doing mobile DFR for purposes of disaster response. So when you're not necessarily able to be at a fixed location or in a place where there's an established DFR program, that's where, I think the mobile DFR thing could potentially come in handy. Abe, you look like you want to add something there.
Yeah, so we've done the mobile DFR thing before, and that was a Saturday morning. We had a active shooter, for lack of a better term, but a guy was suicidal, fired a shot in his apartment. And he fled into the wood line and was firing shots in the wood. And I remember vividly, Deputy Chief called me, and we set up a quick and dirty DFR program in the parking lot of a Kroger at our mobile command post, and we put a visual observer on the top of a high rise about a quarter to half a mile down the road, and we were right at the end of the PDK's runway, so we had to call the SGI, the System Operations Center, to get an SGI code to operate there, and they gave it to us due to the nature of the situation. But we literally had someone sitting in the command post, remotely operating the camera, the sensor on the drone, with the pilot in command on the ground, with our visual observers observing the airport and the takeoff and landing pattern, so we didn't interfere with any manned aircraft. So it can be done. That's not what we ideally want to do, because it involves more people in the operation to do it safely. But the whole premise of DFR is to have a rooftop drone program, because you can literally see for miles if you're above everything else.
Yeah, no, that's cool that you guys have actually done that. And yeah, you're taking the safety and repetition out of the mix there at that point, because you're doing it from an unknown location, right, with unknown factors and things like that. So you talked about this. We've all talked about this kind of in the last couple minutes here about as far as personnel costs. This is always the question we all get. What does it cost to start a DFR program? And of course, we know that there are varying different levels and ways to do it. But what do you tell people? I can tell you what we tell people, but what do you guys tell people when they ask you that question?
I'm gonna let Matt Rowland go first, so if I know if I got a good deal in that.
I'm not sure that I can't fully answer that question, because it's different for everyone. We decided to buy 2 M300s for our program. We've invested in Live 911 that's coming. We did all of our, as we've mentioned, we've done all of our COAs, everything. We've done all that in-house with our guys. And that doesn't take away from folks like you that are doing them for other people, because that's great. We just decided that we were going to do it in-house. So to put a final number on it would be tough for me, because it's going to be different for everyone, and as we prepped for this meeting, it was one of the things we brought up was, where do you want to start? Do you want to start without the waiver? Do you want to start, you could do DFR with an M2 if you wanted to. You don't have to have one of the big drones, but the big drones make it nicer. They've got, you can go out 2 to 3 miles and that kind of thing, if you, of course, have the waiver. So to put a price on it, I think is, for me, kind of a tough question to be real specific.
Yeah, so that's also a loaded question. When folks ask me, it's difficult to ask, especially when it's the elected leadership, because I always go, well, it depends on what you mean. We did it a little bit differently. We had a plan. The plan was to, hey, we're going to have this project. We're going to look and see what it looks like for us. And then very early in the process, the chief said, hey, well, ask Kate, if we pay 5 years up front, can we get a deal? And so we paid 5 years up front. And so that made it easier, because I know for the next 5 years, I don't have to go back and look and say, hey, what's the cost of the solution? I tell agencies when they come and say, hey, how much does it look to start a DFR program? I say, if you set $50,000 aside for equipment, software, training, codes, and stuff to get started, you're in a good spot to start a one drone operation, and then build upon that. I would tell folks, if you're trying to start a DFR program with $20,000, it's not going to happen. Then that's just to be completely honest.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. And I think, you guys teed it up, so I'll hit it out of the park here. We don't make any secret about the fact that we are a consulting company and we do charge for our services, but we do stuff like this to make sure that everybody has access to this information. And Matt, I tell people it's like painting your house. You can do it yourself and it's going to take twice as long and be a pain, or you can pay somebody to do it faster. And either way is great. So that's, you don't have to be a Skyfire client to come join our webinar. And I appreciate that everybody's got, different needs. So, as you said, Abe, in your intro, this is not a sales pitch. We're going to just talk about the nitty gritty here of getting these programs started. So speaking of nitty gritty, somebody asked, what make and model UAS are you guys flying?
So here in Brookhaven, for our DFR program, we chosen the DJI Matrice 300. I'll say this, the China question, just going to throw it out there.
There's a whole separate webinar for that.
Yeah. I'm not concerned about it. We're not concerned about it simply because we use DJI's aircraft, but we don't use their software. We use a proprietary US-based software to fly our drones. So none of our data, none of our video, telemetry, none of that is coming into the DJI Flight Hub or the DJI Fly app. That's the benefit of using the third-party apps like Drone Sense Remote, like Motorola Kate, is you're not worried about those things because you're not flying through their software. So I'll throw that disclaimer out there for anybody who's concerned, oh, they've got DJI aircraft. Yeah, we've got them, but we're not using the software. And that's really where the concern lies from a data security standpoint.
Matt, how about you guys?
Yep, the M300, that's what we're using. And just like the lieutenant said, since it's running through Drone Sense, we're not, anytime we fly, we're flying with Drone Sense. So whatever it is across the board for our team, as far as that concern, and on the disclaimer there from the lieutenant, Drone Sense, remote, and the M300s.
Great. Yeah. And obviously, like, I was half kidding, but I mean, the China issue could be a whole separate webinar, and we probably will do one of those at some point, but we'll save that discussion for another time because it would take quite a while. So let me see if we have, it doesn't look like we have any other questions here. I do want to address something we kind of talked about in the prep for this. Kind of the one thing we haven't talked about as far as cost is there are levels of this, right? And Abe, I think you wanted to talk about this. There's the the kick in the tires version, and then there's the the full on. You talked about $50,000. Like, walk me through, like, what is a gold, platinum, silver, bronze, whatever analogy you want to use there.
So when the one thing, and the deputy chief hit on it earlier about where we are budgeting to move forward in our program, we're talking about moving and I got this from Don Redmond, moving our project from a project to a program. And so early on, we started out with the project. We didn't go around telling folks it was a project, and we committed to trying it, I say, for 5 years, because that's what the chief said, hey, let's do this. Chula Vista is the platinum program. That's the Range Rover, the Rolls Royce, the Maybach of DFR programs. You can get in here this thing, like I said, with a Toyota Corolla for $50,000. Folks say a Toyota Corolla, hey, that thing is reliable, get you where you need to go, and you'll be happy with it because you had nothing else. And so the Toyota Corolla that's the $50,000 program, or you can say that's your DFR bronze level. And then for folks, I want to back up for a second. We talk about apps and what DFR is. DFR isn't just about flying a drone to a call, but it's about pushing data and transmitting data. So anytime our drone launches to a call, all the members in our department have access to the live stream. DFR is about streaming what the drone sees. And so our officers who are responding to the call, before they pull up to the house, they can log in and see what it is, or they can ask the drone pilot, what do you see? Their supervisors can see what they're observing. The command staff can see it. So it's another layer of transparency for police officers in this age of accountability and transparency. And so that is, you can do that in the bronze package, and then you build your way up too. So we're moving from, I wouldn't even say we had a Toyota Corolla, because I think we had a nice Lexus ES. And so we're moving from a Lexus now to the Rolls Royce, because that's what our elected leaders believe the city of Brookhaven and the Brookhaven citizens deserve, and they believe that's what that this program is capable of.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And Mike, you've talked about this a lot too. I mean, what do you think about the idea of just getting something started and starting to kind of get your feet wet, kick the tires, so to speak?
Yeah, I think Lieutenant's right. You're not going to do it for $10,000. I mean, you need to get a drone, you need to get the COA, and you need to start the training and that kind of stuff. So you get the 107 licenses. So there's a little bit of upfront to it, but it's not as big a program as some think. And with those basics, we just said you have a program you can start. You can push video. We've seen programs out there that can push the video back to the command center, to officers for $150, $200 a month. But if you really want to be interactive with that, if you want to be able to use the data, if you want to be able to have longer, more coverage, 18 hours or 24-hour shifts, and those kinds of things, it's a program. I mean, it's a much bigger event. So, but by getting started, getting yourself in, getting UAS into your budget, into your mindset, in your agency, and in your community, that's the first step. And then as the program grows, and like Brookhaven's program is growing, Fort Wayne's program will certainly grow. As those programs grow, you can add layers of sophistication, like better software. You can add artificial intelligence to give you things like color or motion in your imagery that you can't see naked eye, or that's not easy to see naked eye. You can add more sophisticated aircraft, better sensors. Eventually, I'd like to add other types of sensors to this. But it's going to grow. You just got to start it. And we're always on the Skyfire side, and there's others. We're always here, former LE people here to try to help walk people through that. And certainly take advantage of all the resources that people have done. That's the whole purpose of this webinar, is people like Lieutenant Anna and the Deputy Chief and Matt in Fort Wayne, and the folks in Chula Vista. They've walked through all this. They've dragged the backpack up the heavy hill, and I think they stand ready to kind of advise and give some good information to get these programs started, because I think this is where things are headed, and I think it's a valuable program for just about any community, whether it's for their police agency, their fire, or their EMS eventually.
Well, one of the things we've talked about being in the platinum level that we have not addressed here yet, and I want to make sure we talk about, is Live 911. You've both identified this as something that you thought was very important. Can you, one of you or both of you, talk to me about what it is and why you think it's so critical for the DFR process?
I'll let you have it, Matt.
Well, it gets you that call as it's coming in. So anybody that's been in law enforcement, been around dispatch centers, it's not a foul on our dispatchers. It's just in the way that the system's set up. The call comes in, the dispatcher has to decipher what's going on, where it's at. Then that has to be inputted into the CAD system. Some CAD systems you can see being inputted, some you can't. And then once they get that information, then they've got to accept it. Then it moves over to the dispatcher that's dispatching it, if you have a big enough agency, or maybe it's the person that took the call. But all of that takes some time. When you have a system like Live 911 and that call is geofenced to where you're operating, that call comes in and immediately you can start to hear it. You can make that decision as soon as you start to hear it. If it's a bunch of screaming, you get the lat long on where it's at, and you can start to fly from that point. And that's how you can really get a head start on patrol being dispatched to it, is because it's going through all this other process in the dispatch center. So for us, it's a slam dunk on being able to get the drone up and get the drone there.
Abe, anything you wanted to add to that?
Nope, he hit the nail on the head on that one.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting about Live 911 is you're actually hearing the 911 call as it's happening, and so from a data collection perspective, it doesn't. Your response times are based upon when the call was actually dispatched, right? So yeah, you're pre-dispatching to the call, so your response time is going to be like 10 seconds or something. Yeah. So
I actually
that's
did
awesome.
think about something, Matt.
What's that?
I did think about something to that point about Live 911. You look at the phenomenon of, we talk about Karen, right? Karen that called 911, nobody was breaking the law. Drone first responder is a valuable tool in regards to neutralizing the Karens, right? Creating an environment where law enforcement can respond to calls and make informed decisions. Live 911 takes that to an entirely new level, allowing our drone, in addition to the officer to hear what was said, to make a better informed decision. And we know better informed cops make better decisions.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely accurate. And definitely a great point there. So I don't see any other questions coming in, so we can start to wrap up here. But I wanted to just kind of go round robin and say, if you're speaking to an agency that is watching the webinar or downloads the webinar later, what would you say to them as far as starting a program or any advice that you would have? Deputy Chief, I'm going to start with you since we haven't called on you in a minute here. But if somebody comes to their chief and says, hey, I want to start a DFR program, or that's their plan, what do you suggest they say?
Engagement. Engagement was key to us. You have to engage your city leaders. You have to engage your council. You have to engage your community and any other stakeholders for where you're at. If you don't have an understanding as far as what your goal and purpose is with a DFR program for your area, you're just going to be spinning your wheels. So engagement, and from there, decide what a program for your area is going to look like. Are you a 300 plus square mile county that's looking to start a DFR program? Well, if you're wanting to cover 300 and something square miles, I don't even want to think about what that would look like. So understanding what your needs are, what areas, a data-driven approach to what areas you would need that support, what populated areas of the county or jurisdiction would need that support, and just having an understanding as far as what your community desires would be for you to use that tool for public safety, and then understanding how you're going to use the benefits of providing your officers. And you've heard it repeated throughout the last hour plus now, hour and a half, situational awareness and knowledge for the officers. And Lieutenant Ayana, to echo your comment, better informed officers are going to make better decisions. And this is one of the first tools that we've seen the most success with providing officers with that information so that they are making better decisions.
Great. And Mike, how about you? Some closing thoughts?
Sure. I guess my thought is we're talking about DFR here. That's the focus of this discussion. But there's two parallel programs in some of these agencies. There's the DFR program, which is really its goal is very specific: get to the scene as fast as we can get there, and get eyes on it for situational awareness. That's the program. And then there's the what I would call a patrol or tactical program, and that is being able to put drones into the buildings in front of the SWAT team, or being able to do the reconstruction, or be able to do long range standoff. Cover a undercover meet type of thing. So both programs, they're somewhat independent in the sense that their mission's a little different, but they're all run by the same agency. They're all run under the same rules, under the same COA, and so they aren't contradictory. So I think it's not a one or the other case here. And so my suggestion would be to kind of parallel both of those programs in your agency and use them effectively. They both have certain benefit. And I think the engagement, we talked a little bit about transparency and local media and all that. I guess my last tip is the more people feel comfortable that this is really, these things are here to help them as opposed to monitor them, the better we're all going to be in terms of building these programs and getting buy-in.
Yeah, absolutely. Matt, how about you? Closing thoughts?
I would just like to say that there is, for us to separate, just like Mike was talking about with the patrol program versus the DFR program, that is something that we've had to work on because our patrol program is so robust. The DFR is a different element of that. So trying to create things together and decide on what's going to work and what's not going to work, that's some of the issues that we've had to deal with. And you mentioned the square mileage, Chief. We are 100 square miles, where Chula Vista is 50 square miles. So that's one of the things that we've also addressed and looked at as far as our response for DFR. Community involvement, we engage the community as much as we can. We have a request an officer program. We get out into the community. I was at one this morning, showing off the M300 to the community folks. I have 2 officers out right now. They're also engaging the community. They've got the other 300 out there at the moment. So it's getting out, telling folks about the program, what we're doing, how we're doing it, how their privacy is not going to be at risk, and the things that we're doing to keep them safe, but also recognize that they still want to be, they still want their privacy as well.
That's great. Thank you, sir. And Lieutenant Ayana, I'll let you bring us home here.
So yeah, I can't boil it down to any one thing, but I think of the things that were told to me by Fritz Reber and Don Redmond and the team in Chula Vista on how to make a successful program. And I look at where we were when we started to where we are now. And I think the easiest thing that got us where we are now, where people are clamoring for more drone, is publicizing what you're doing with the drones. To Matt and the Fort Wayne team's credit, they've got a robust Instagram page that we're about to steal, because I'm all about stealing good ideas. That's why we got a DFR program. They've got a robust Instagram page for their UAS team, highlighting how they're using drones and how they're engaging the public. So it's important that we as public safety, because folks think that this is a spy tool. This is a spy tool for the government, for the police, to target minority communities or disadvantaged communities, or target citizens in general. And that's not what it is. And so we would do our best to publicize the videos that we can. And we won't put out videos if it's just an encounter that doesn't result in criminal charges. It's got to be something that is worthy of us publicizing somebody's identity. And so I would tell anybody, publicize the win. So if you've got drones and you're using them proactively to support public safety, and I'm not saying proactively as in patrolling, but proactively and to bring in resolution for crimes and victims, publicize how you're using them and consistently do that so folks aren't fearful of the drone. When you say drone, most Americans think of drones firing missiles in Iraq or somewhere overseas. So it's important that we publicize those wins. I'd also tell folks, just do it. Don't talk about it. You can spend a lot of time planning, but you don't know what you don't know until you start moving forward. And so use folks as resources. I ask folks commonly, hey, why are you doing something different? I think we were able to set up a robust program as easy as we were, and it wasn't easy because we relied on Chula Vista's input and their experience and their knowledge and all of that to build what we've got. So use folks as resources. I know Fritz Reber, if you email him, he'll respond quick. Don Redmond, they'll respond quick. All of those folks are there to help you be successful. And we're successful because at any moment I can pick up the phone and even call their leadership and Captain Fox and Lieutenant English and Sergeant Bruzy now if we've got a question. So use the folks in public safety as a resource to make your program successful.
Would you say that Reber and Redmond are your heroes?
They are my heroes. It says it right there. Reber and Redmond are my
We couldn't finish the webinar without talking about what was on the back of your whiteboard there. So I could not agree more. Both of those guys have been amazing partners and friends for a long time. So just to wrap it up with my closing thoughts are thank you guys for being here. This is really important stuff. We've went half an hour, 32 minutes over our allotted time here, but I think that is a testament to the fact that there's a lot to talk about here, and there's a lot to be learned from the folks who are already out there doing this. If you guys have questions that didn't get addressed here, you can reach out to these guys directly, and if you guys are open to it, we can publicize your information, or you can just go to the Brookhaven Police Department Facebook page or website. Same thing with Fort Wayne Police Department, or you can reach out to us and we'll put you in touch with those guys. We are always happy to answer questions. I always joke that I won't charge you for anything unless you buy something. So if you want to just talk about DFR, we have a great staff of folks, myself and Mike included, that will talk to you about this stuff all the time. So thank you all so much for watching. Thank you for being here. This is, I don't know if my team even knows this yet, but I'm just going to announce it right here. This is the first of several DFR webinars we're going to be doing. I definitely want to talk about different software, and we'll do a software showdown, so to speak, although I think everybody's got something great to offer. We also want to talk about equipment. Of course, as we talked about, we'll do something on the Great China issue and what we do about any of that, and some of the fallout from federal grants and things like that. So we really appreciate you guys being with us. Thank you so much for the audience for watching. If you have any questions, like I said, you can reach us at info@skyfireconsulting.com, on Facebook, on Twitter, on LinkedIn. We are still not on TikTok, but maybe getting there soon. And thank you guys all, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thank you, Matt. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks guys for